He didn't fire me because I failed. He fired me because I didn't fit the mold he wanted to control. I was halfway through reviewing the quarterly sales data when Martin stormed into my office. No knock, no courtesy. Just a loud, deliberate entrance meant to rattle me. Typical. "Elena!" he barked, tossing a file onto my desk. "We need to talk. Now." I glanced at the folder, then at the man who had hovered over this company like a storm cloud for the past 4 years. Martin Rees, smug polished, and the kind of man who never looked twice at a woman in the office unless he needed coffee or someone to book his tea times. He liked power. But more than that, he liked reminding others that he had it. Still, I stayed calm. I always did. "Of course," I replied smoothly, gesturing to the chair across from me. He didn't sit. Instead, he loomed. "The board's decided to restructure the leadership team," he said. "We're moving in a different direction. Frankly, we need people who can lead, not just follow spreadsheets." My heart skipped, but I blinked once and didn't move. "You're firing me." He smirked like he'd just won a game I hadn't agreed to play. "Let's not be dramatic," he said. "We're releasing you from your position, effective immediately. No warning, no performance review, no acknowledgement that my department had just posted the highest revenue growth in 3 years. Just dismissal." "I see," I said quietly. "May I ask why?" He leaned back slightly as if the decision was already beneath him. "You lack vision. You manage tasks, not people. And let's be honest, this industry, it needs strong leadership, assertiveness, confidence, traits you haven't exactly demonstrated." There it was, not even veiled. A dig at my gender wrapped in buzzwords and corporate condescension. I'd heard it before. I just hadn't expected it here from someone who once forgot his own password so many times that I'd created a dummy recovery protocol to keep him from calling Ite 5 times a week. "I understand," I said, my voice neutral. Martin narrowed his eyes, clearly irritated by my composure. He'd expected me to cry, to argue, to beg. He didn't know me at all. "I'll need your badge and your laptop by 5:00 p.m., he continued. "HR has your severance packet." I stood, extended my hand. "Thank you for the clarity." He hesitated, then shook it. "Good luck out there." As he turned and strutted from my office like some victorious general, I sat back down and exhaled. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. In fact, I felt lighter, because Martin had no idea what he'd just done. He thought he'd ended my career, but what he actually gave me was permission. 2 weeks ago, everything changed, and I'd been waiting quietly, strategically for this exact moment. On my desk was a photo of my father, the founder of this company, smiling proudly as he cut the ribbon at our first regional office. He used to say, "Wait for the right moment, Elena. It'll come. And when it does, you won't need to raise your voice. You'll already own the room." I ran my fingers along the edge of that photo. "You were right, Dad. It was time." I began packing my things, nothing dramatic. A mug from the team, a few personal photos, and a stack of old notebooks filled with ideas that never made it past Martin's desk. Outside my office, the air was thick with awkward curiosity. Some coworkers gave me sympathetic glances. Others avoided eye contact. No one asked what happened, but the silence screamed. Did she get fired? What did she do wrong? I didn't answer. I just smiled, small, polite, and left. The moment I stepped into the sunlight, the weight of 15 years inside that building slipped from my shoulders. They thought they were discarding me. What they actually did was set me free, and that meant only one thing. It was time. But they had no idea what was coming next. They stripped me of my title, but they couldn't touch what I carried in silence. I didn't cry when I got home. I didn't scream or rage or break things. I just stood in my apartment, still wearing my heels, still holding that box of office trinkets, and I let the quiet settle. 15 years. That's how long I gave that company. My weekends, my holidays, my sanity, all for a man like Martin to reduce it to, "You manage tasks, not people." I laughed, then a sharp, bitter sound. Because Martin never once managed anything without borrowing someone else's credibility, mostly mine. I placed the box down, gently walked to my bookshelf, and pulled out a small envelope tucked between an old journal and a dusty framed certificate. My 30th birthday had just passed, and with it, something I hadn't told anyone, something no one at that company knew. 2 weeks earlier, I sat across from Mr. Harrington, my family's attorney, in his quiet, wood-paneled office. He slid a thick envelope toward me. "Your father left very specific instructions," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You weren't to open this until your 30th birthday, not a day before." I had laughed softly. "What is it?" "A delayed birthday card." "Something more," he replied. "Your father was a man of vision. He trusted you more than anyone, and he believed in timing." That word stayed with me, timing. I hadn't opened the envelope that day, not right away. Life had been busy, reports, forecasts, Martin's endless meetings, but now I understood. I sat down in the quiet same chair where my father used to sip his coffee every Sunday. Sunlight poured in through the window. The city hummed below. I opened the envelope. The letter was handwritten, neat, familiar. My father's voice came through every word. "Elena, if you're reading this, you're 30, and that means you're ready. You've spent your life working twice as hard for half the credit. I saw it even when you thought I didn't. I also saw how the company changed after I left, and I knew a time might come when you'd need more than a seat at the table, so I gave you the table." I stopped breath, caught in my throat. Beneath the letter was a legal document, embossed, notarized. It detailed a trust agreement executed 5 years earlier. My father had retained 90% of the company's voting shares when he stepped down, and every single one had been transferred to me, held in trust until I turned 30, with full authority, full rights. I was no longer just an ex-employee. I was the majority shareholder. I stared at the document, reread it 3 times, then again, as if it might vanish, but it didn't. My hands trembled, not from fear, from the overwhelming gravity of what it meant. I didn't need Martin's approval. I didn't need to be rehired. I already owned the company. That night, I called Mr. Harrington. "Is this real?" I asked. "Yes," he said gently. "Your father structured the trust carefully. It's airtight. The board doesn't know. It was designed that way so you could decide when and how to act." I sat in stunned silence. "Why didn't he activate it sooner?" I finally whispered. "Because he wanted you to know the company on your own terms, to see what it became without him, so you could choose whether to save it or let it go." My throat tightened. He trusted me, not just with memories, with legacy, with a weapon, because power in silence is still power. And now I had it. But I wouldn't use it recklessly. That's not who I am. I would wait, and when the moment came, I'd strike with precision. The next day, I texted my lawyer one line, "It's time. Prepare everything." He replied almost instantly, "Understood. Shareholder meeting can be scheduled within 5 business days." I looked back at the company headquarters on my phone's background, the glass facade that had reflected so many hollow victories. I used to walk those halls like I belonged there. Now I would return, not as a woman begging for validation, but as the one who owned the room. And Martin, he would never see it coming. They thought I was done, but I was just getting started. I didn't show up for my mandatory HR exit interview. They called twice, emailed 3 times. I ignored them all, let them wonder, let the silence make them squirm. Instead, I sat at a small table tucked in the back of a quiet downtown cafe, sipping a flat white as Mr. Harrington slid a folder across the table. "Final draft's ready," he said. "Once you sign this, it becomes official. The board will have no choice but to hold a special meeting. You hold 90%. That's game over." I picked up the pen, my hands steady. I didn't even hesitate. Click, signature, date. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. "They won't see this coming," I said, eyes locked on the document. Harrington gave a small smile. Martin, especially. Martin. He'd strutted out of my office like a conqueror, tossed me aside like I was disposable. And now he was about to learn what happens when you underestimate a woman built on strategy, not ego. We set the meeting for Tuesday. Harrington would serve them the notice Friday morning. 2 business days to panic. Perfect. That same afternoon, I met with Caroline Winters, the trustee who'd managed my father's shares for years. Sharp eyes, cold facts, no time for small talk. I watched him dismantle your father's legacy one department at a time, she said, tapping the file in front of her. You don't owe that man courtesy. Inside the file, ownership certificates, performance reports, internal audits, HR complaints ignored, executive bonuses bloated beyond reason, a summary of declining employee satisfaction and soaring turnover. He's running this place like a boys' club, she added, and it's killing the company. I nodded, flipping through page after page. I'd lived it, felt it. Now I could finally prove it. No need to shout, I murmured. Let the numbers speak. And oh, they would. That night, I walked past the mural in Caroline's building, an oil painting of my father at the company's very first office. He looked younger, stronger. His hand rested on the shoulder of a small girl in a red dress. Me. I paused, staring up at the image. He built something worth protecting, and I was done letting men like Martin poison it. By Monday morning, rumors swirled around my sudden absence. Old teammates texted me, "Did you quit HR's acting weird? Martin's pretending like you were never there. What the hell happened? Whatever you did, I hope you're okay." I didn't respond. Not yet. The silence was part of the plan. Let Martin feel safe. Let him keep playing king. Let him walk into that boardroom like he owned it. Because Tuesday would change everything. That night, I stood in front of my mirror wearing the navy blue suit I'd bought years ago. Never worn, saved for a moment that mattered. Tailored, sharp, clean. The kind of suit you wear when you're not asking for permission anymore. I practiced what I'd say. Not a speech, just a sentence or two. Measured, undeniable. The truth would do the work for me. And when I walked into that boardroom, I wouldn't need volume. I would bring silence and authority. Because they hadn't fired a worker. They'd tried to erase a woman who already owned the future. And come Tuesday, I would remind them exactly who I was. The question was, were they ready? He fired me on a Thursday. I returned on a Tuesday to take his chair. Tuesday morning arrived with the crisp confidence of inevitability. I didn't rush. I didn't rehearse. I simply stepped into the tailored navy suit, slipped the folder under my arm, and walked toward the building I once thought I'd never enter again. This time, I didn't pause at the front desk. The receptionist blinked in surprise. "Miss Wren." "Elena." I corrected gently. "We're all on the same team." She stood as I passed, but I didn't need her permission. Mr. Harrington met me by the elevators, crisp and unreadable as always. "They're already in the boardroom," he said. "Martin thinks it's just another quarterly review." "Good," I said. "Let him finish his monologue." The elevator doors opened and I stepped out, heels clicking softly across polished marble. Behind the frosted glass of the boardroom, I could see outlines, gestures, heads nodding. Martin, pacing at the front like he owned the oxygen in the room. I didn't knock. I opened the door. The click of the handle turned heads. Martin froze mid-sentence. "Elena," he asked, a forced smile curling as confusion flickered across his face. "This meeting is for board members only." I said nothing. I walked calmly to the head of the table, the seat no one dared touch since my father stepped down, and I placed a thick folder on the polished wood. Ownership documents, financial records, the end of his reign. "Exactly," I replied and sat down. The silence was immediate. One of the board members, Mr. Dalton, a man who had known my father, leaned forward and picked up the document. His eyebrows lifted. "Is this—" "Accurate it is," I said. 90% of this company's voting shares have been held in trust under my name, activated on my 30th birthday, filed, notarized, and legally binding." Martin laughed. Short, sharp, dismissive. "This is a joke," he said. "Your father would never." He did. I cut in calm but pointed, because he saw where this company might go without him, and he trusted me to decide if it was worth saving. Mr. Harrington slid a second folder to the board secretary, a certified copy of the ownership transfer. Martin looked around the room, trying to reassert control. "You can't just walk in here and take over. That's not how this works." "You're right," I said evenly, "which is why I called this special shareholder meeting in accordance with company bylaws." I opened another folder. "As majority shareholder, I'm submitting a motion for leadership review, specifically the position of Chief Executive Officer." Martin shot to his feet, eyes blazing. "This is a coup. You've been planning this. This is personal." "No, Martin." I said, my voice like steel under silk. "What you did to this company was personal. I passed around the performance reports, the HR complaints, the overspending, the resignations, the culture decay. You built a kingdom of fear," I continued. "You rewarded loyalty over merit volume over results and image over integrity. You let good people leave and promoted mediocrity as long as it agreed with you." Board members began flipping through the pages. The CFO paled. General counsel began typing furiously on a tablet. Mr. Dalton exhaled slowly. I had no idea it had gotten this bad. Martin's fists clenched. "You twisted the data. This is your revenge fantasy." I didn't twist anything I said, meeting his gaze. I simply stopped hiding it. I pulled out the final sheet, the motion to remove Martin Rhee as CEO. And as the majority shareholder, I said clearly, "I vote to terminate your position, effective immediately." The boardroom froze. The secretary looked stunned. You don't need a second vote," she asked. "I own 90%, I said. "That's not a vote. That's a verdict." Martin looked at them, then at me. "You can't do this. I already did. No one called security." He didn't resist. But as he walked out, his face twisted in disbelief. I saw it. The man who once towered over me now looked small. Not because I shouted louder, but because the truth stood taller. And when the door clicked shut behind him, I turned back to the board. "This company deserves better," I said. "So do the people who build it every day. Starting now, we rebuild." Mr. Dalton leaned back, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a while, respect. "Welcome back, Elena. They tried to erase me. Now my name is etched into the walls they built. I didn't move into the CEO's office immediately. I didn't need the symbolism of a bigger desk to validate my return. My focus was elsewhere on the people, because power without purpose is just ego in a suit." On Monday, 1 week after the shareholders' meeting, I called for an all-hands meeting in the main conference hall, the same space where Martin used to parade inflated projections and hand out hollow praise to the same handful of favorites. But this time, the room felt different. Quiet murmurs, hesitant glances, rows half-filled, like the staff didn't know whether to hope again or brace for disappointment. I stood alone at the front of the room. No microphone, no slides, just me. "Some of you know me," I began. "Some of you only know what you've been told. So let me say this clearly, I didn't come here to seize power. I came to restore trust." There was a shift in the air, subtle but real. For years, this company ran on your effort, your sleepless nights, your belief that what we were building actually mattered, and somewhere along the way, that was lost. I paused, letting the silence stretch. "I was fired last week," I said with the faintest smile, "told I lacked the leadership to move this company forward, that I didn't fit the mold." Some chuckled nervously, others stared. I didn't fight back, not then, because I knew something Martin didn't. Leadership isn't about volume, it's about vision, it's about respect, it's about listening. And starting today, everything changes. That week, I did something radical. I listened. I sat down with engineers, interns, receptionists, cleaning staff. I asked simple questions. What's not working? What do you need? Who's doing great work and being overlooked? They told me everything, and I acted. I promoted Maya from customer support to head of client experience. She'd been doing the job unofficially for a year while her manager collected bonuses off her effort. I brought back Kevin, a brilliant developer who quit after being passed over 3 times for men who couldn't code past PowerPoint. I met with HR. Every complaint buried under Martin's tenure, I read every single one. By the end of the second week, several mid-level managers were gone quietly. No press release, just the start of a cultural purge. Then I launched the People First Initiative. Not a buzzword. A real structured internal program to reward innovation, promote equity, and recognize contribution regardless of title. No more whisper networks. No more glass ceilings. Just good people doing great work and finally being seen for it. Late one night, I walked the halls alone. The office felt warmer now. Lights stayed on, not out of fear, but choice. People stayed late not to impress, but to collaborate. Laughter had returned to the break room. Photos, plants, and messy desks replaced the sterile silence of Martin's rule. And then just before heading home, I saw something. On a whiteboard near engineering, someone had written in bold blue marker, "She came back." 3 words, underlined twice. Not she took over. Not she fired Martin. She came back. I stood there for a moment just reading it. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about revenge. This was about redemption. Not just for me, but for every voice that had been silenced, every idea dismissed, every door that had been quietly closed. And now, those doors were opening again. 1 year ago, they fired me. Today, I lead them not with noise, but with legacy. It was exactly 1 year to the day since Martin fired me. 12 months since I walked out of this building with a cardboard box, dismissed like dead weight. Now I stood in front of the same glass doors, no box in hand, no bitterness in my chest, just peace. I nodded at the front desk. The receptionist stood when she saw me. "Morning, Miss Wren." "Elena," I reminded her gently. "We're all on the same team." I rode the elevator to the top floor, the same floor that used to belong to Martin. Now it belonged to something better. Not just me, but to an era built on clarity, collaboration, and quiet strength. I hadn't remodeled the CEO's office. Not really. The walnut desk was still there. The view was the same. The changes weren't cosmetic. They were cultural. The photographs lining the walls were no longer just portraits of retired executives and old mergers. They were snapshots of people, our people. Product teams launching successful updates, customer support agents solving complex problems, interns turning into team leads. And behind my chair, mounted with quiet pride, was a large portrait of my father, not to idolize him, to remind me. This seat came with responsibility, not privilege. I sat down, opened my laptop, and scanned the latest quarterly report. Customer satisfaction up 23%. Employee retention up 41%. Revenue record-breaking. But what I cared about more were the internal scores. Morale, feedback, inclusion. People no longer whispered complaints. They spoke and were heard. They no longer feared evaluation. They trusted it. My father used to say, great companies aren't built on numbers. They're built on people who believe they matter. That belief had returned. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," I said. Maya walked in confident now in the role she'd once only dreamed of. "They're ready in the boardroom," she said. "You good?" I stood nodding. "Let's go." The boardroom looked different now, too. Not the table or the chairs, but the people. Half the board were women. A third were under 40. Many came from non-traditional backgrounds. They asked harder questions. They listened longer, and the decisions smarter, more human. At the center of the table sat Richard Tanaka, our new strategic advisor. Sharp mind, steady voice. "Elena has a few words," he said, nodding to me. I hadn't planned to speak, but when every eye turned to me, not in judgment but in trust, I felt something settle in my chest. Purpose. "I want to thank you all," I began, "for believing in change, for making hard decisions when easy ones would have been safer, for helping me rebuild not just a company, but a place people want to be part of." I paused. Someone once told me I lacked leadership, that I didn't look the part, that I was too quiet. A few knowing smiles met mine. But leadership isn't about shouting. I said. It's about showing up, listening, standing up for people when it's inconvenient and doing what's right, especially when no one is watching. I looked down at the table, my father's table once, now mine. I'm proud of what we're building, not because it's mine, but because it finally belongs to all of us. Applause followed, not loud, just steady, real. That afternoon, I walked through every department, like I used to back when I was just Elena from Ops. I stopped to high-five interns. I laughed with product leads. I celebrated a client's success over cupcakes in the break room, not because I had to, because I wanted to. That's what this place had become again, a home, not a machine. And as I stepped back into my office and closed the door, I glanced once more at the photo on my desk. My father, hand on my shoulder, both of us smiling in front of the company's first office. He built the foundation, but I rebuilt the soul. Have you ever been underestimated, only to come back stronger? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. This is just the beginning.